Kitco Mining, special coverage of the National Bank of Canada Capital Markets CEO Mining Conference, is brought to you by Agnico Eagle.
One of the next crop of silver projects takes a big step towards construction. Hello and welcome to Kitco Mining with me, Paul Harris, here at the 2025 NBC Capital Markets CEO Mining Conference in London, England. Joining me today is John Miniotis, CEO of AbraSilver. John, welcome to Kitco.
Paul, thank you very much for having me.
Now, it's been a very busy year for AbraSilver. You're advancing the Diablillos silver gold project in Salta, Argentina. You've just put out some sort of big milestones, some big steps there. You just submitted an application for the RIGI tax and legal stability regime. If accepted, John, let's start there. If accepted, what is the potential impact of that on the project?
Yeah, so RIGI has been an absolute game changer for Argentina as a whole and specifically for our project. So our large-scale Diablillos project, as you mentioned, is very advanced stage. We have a large resource, about 350 million ounces on a silver equivalent basis. This is all close to surface, open pittable in oxides. So this would absolutely be one of the biggest primary silver projects globally in the world. And once it's in operation, will be one of the top silver mines globally as well. So it's a very large-scale project. And now timing has aligned perfectly with us, for us, in terms of this RIGI incentive regime. So President Milei was enacted, of course, this new incentive regime. He officially enacted that into law last year in 2024. And basically it's meant to attract new investment into Argentina, large-scale investments. So if you're investing over $200 million in a new project moving forward in the near future, they're offering a 30-year stability agreement where they're offering much lower taxes. Instead of the 35% tax rate, you have a 25% tax rate for 30 years. They've eliminated export duties. Historically, exporting gold outside of Argentina, you had to pay 8% in duties. And exporting silver, you had to pay 4.5% in export duties. Now it's zero for 30 years. And one of the most important sort of incentives being offered is they've now fully eliminated foreign exchange restrictions as well. So typically that's been one of the major challenges of operating in Argentina, that once you're producing, it's been quite challenging to get money out of the country. Now for projects that qualify for RIGI, again, you have a 30-year stability agreement where you no longer need to repatriate your funds into pesos. And so when you sell gold and silver abroad, you're not only paying lower taxes, you're paying no export duties, you receive your foreign, you receive US dollars, let's say abroad, you can keep those US dollars abroad. So you don't have to worry about how am I going to get these, proceeds outside of the country. And so this is a real game changer for us. And so this incentive regime is really a short-term stimulus package. It's really only in effect for 2 years. And so, in fact, it's expiring in July of 2026, in about 7-8 months from now. And so we applied last week, as you mentioned, in November. We expect to receive approval. Likely it's going to be in February, I would imagine, but certainly sometime in Q1, early to mid Q1, I expect we get our approval. And then once we have our approval, you have 2 years to spend minimum of $80 million. And that's the last step. Once you do that, it shows that you're actively investing in the country. In 2 years from the date of your approval, if you spend the $80 million, then you qualify for this 30-year stability agreement. And at current commodity prices, the value of the lower taxes and the export duties alone are north of $1 billion US for our project, based on an outdated pre-feasibility study, which is using a lower sort of resource estimate. Based on the current resource estimate, it's going to be far in excess of that. So this is a hugely transformational opportunity for us, greatly simplifies this project, greatly improves the economics, and I think makes this a no-brainer for advancing this project in construction and benefiting from this 30-year stability agreement.
Well, it sounds like the stars are aligning. In addition to RIGI, what that implies, you've got a high gold price, you've got a high silver price. Investor interest is returning to Argentina because of some of the things you mentioned. You can repatriate profits, etc., etc. You have 350 million ounces silver equivalent, as you mentioned. You're looking to produce over 13 million ounces a year. from that. You're working on a feasibility study. How is that going? When will you deliver it? To what extent or not will that differ from the PFS that you put out last year?
Yeah, so the feasibility study is on schedule. It's on track, on schedule. So we're targeting end of Q1 in 2026. So coming up towards the end of March is when we expect to have that finalized. I'd say right now, the engineering is at least 75% complete for that study. So it's very, very well advanced. Again, we have Worley leading that study, a world-class EPCM contractor as well, leading that study. So I think it's a very detailed, thorough study. And of course, we're looking then for a project-ready sort of a construction plan to then take that study and implement it towards a construction decision next year. So that study is going very well. I think for the most part, we're leaving things more or less unchanged from the pre-feas. So we're not expanding the plant, for instance. It's still going to be a 9,000 ton per day throughput rate. However, this study is going to be based on a much larger resource. When we announced the pre-feas, the resource estimate at that time on a measured and indicated basis was about 255 million ounces, silver equivalent. We then did another year's worth of drilling, and that led to a 35% increase in the resources, so another 100 million ounces. So now the current resource estimate is 350 million ounces, and a lot of that increase came from this new Jack deposit, which is very high grades in silver and shallow. So it's really going to benefit the early years of the mine plan, which is essential because that leads to obviously much more robust economics in terms of payback periods, etc. So it's going to be higher production in the early years for sure, as we get higher grades from the Jack deposit, and then a longer mine life.
Okay, so you've got a lot of sort of key catalysts coming early next year. So let's talk about the potential to make a construction decision, a financing decision. The PFS, the capex was about $540 million US. It's, let's say approximately half your current market capitalization. Your silver peer developer, Vizsla Silver, just announced a $300 million convertible note at 5% to help fund its Cordero development in Mexico. It seems that there are more options available now for financing than a year ago. So how is that evolving or changing your thoughts on how you're going to fund this development?
Yeah. So, to that extent, I think right now, as you mentioned, all the stars are aligned in our favor. Argentina is really open for business. That really helps lower the cost of capital for projects like ourselves with gold and silver prices where they're at. Based on the pre-feasibility study at current commodity prices, the payback here, so you mentioned it's over $540 million US capex, obviously a significant number, but the payback period at current spot prices is about 9 months, far less than a year, and that's at current using the old mine plan. Again, we expect the new mine plan is going to have higher production rates in the early years, and so your payback period it's going to be measured in months, not years. So at current spot prices, if we take on quite a bit of debt, we could quickly repay that. And so that really opens up a lot of options. Looking at convertible notes is certainly something we'll do. Looking at traditional debt financing options, clearly we'll consider that. A potential stream, specifically on the gold side of things, because the silver sits closer to surface. And in the early years, we get very, very high silver production. And then as you get deeper down, it does transition and becomes predominantly gold. But we have almost 2 million ounces of gold now in oxide. So we have a big gold component to this. And so, we could consider a stream. Obviously, we'll consider it, and we're not going to commit to anything unless the value's very compelling. And then potentially some potential equity. But I think this is a very financeable project, given the stage our company's in. And also to that, to help us evaluate those financing alternatives, we've just recently strengthened our board quite a bit. So we brought in Marie Inkster, appointed her as chair of our board. I worked with Marie when I was at Lundin Mining. She was the CFO of Lundin Mining for about a decade. She then became CEO, and so she has tons of experience looking at project financing and ultimately building and operating mines as well. And so she's really strengthened us, and I'll rely heavily with myself and the team and our board. We'll evaluate all those opportunities in a lot of detail next year as we're getting closer to announcing the feasibility.
When would you like to have the sort of financing package in place?
Middle of next year, I would say. We've actually given ourselves in the schedule until the end of Q3. I think that's probably very, very conservative. So we really have a lot of catalysts coming up over the next 4 months here. So I'd say the next one here is the permits, the EIA permit approval. We expect that either late this year or very early on next year in January. So we'll see the timing there, but that's essentially imminent now within the next couple of months. Then we get this RIGI approval. So I mentioned we made the application. We expect the approval probably in February, I would say. And then by the end of March, we announce our feasibility study. And then we've given ourselves until the end of Q3 to come up with a final investment decision. So it's about a 6-month. I mean, it seems very conservative. I think we could easily do that on a much quicker timeline, but we've given ourselves 6 months in the schedule. So middle of next year, we're going to evaluate all those options in detail and then obviously look to put something together. Now, the good news is with the financing that we just completed, we're fully financed for all of next year and even to start early works construction activities. So as of today, we have over $65 million in the bank, no debt, $65 million of cash in the bank, no debt, of course. And so next year, without any additional financing, we can look to start some early works construction activities, ordering long lead time items, expanding the camp that we have at site, etc., and moving the project forward.
Well, that's really positive. And of course, all of that timeline you mentioned will still be within the presidency, the administration of Javier Milei. He's a big supporter of the mining sector. He sees that the mining sector as a tool to get Argentina out of its the economic malaise that's been there for the last few decades. Javier Milei did surprisingly well in the midterm elections in October. He voiced that opinion himself. He was surprised at how well he did. What does that mean for the remaining 2 years of his presidential term and the implementation of his Argentina reboot plan and obviously mining within that?
Yeah, look, I think he's had phenomenal economic success already. So he's 2 years into his presidency. So these were the interim elections. His party did extremely well, gained a lot more support in both the House and the Senate in Argentina. But yeah, I think it's really because of, again, with RIGI alone, this new incentive regime, there's been over $15 billion of new projects that have already received approval and more are applying, obviously, as we just applied as well. So $15 billion of new projects that have already been approved within the last 12 months. And so when in Argentina's history have you seen $15 billion come into the country in less than a year? I mean, it's been a transformational, sort of remarkable success, economic success for his regime. You're seeing all these major projects across all industries, mining, oil and gas, agriculture, etc., moving forward. And so I think the benefit is that they're offering already a 30-year stability agreement. So the projects like ours that qualify for this RIGI, you have that certainty for an extended period of time, well past President Milei's administrative term. So we get locked in for 30 years. And I think that's what really enables mining companies and other large companies to have a lot of confidence in investing in Argentina. But yeah, no, I think now with the new sort of success that he's had in terms of the midterm elections, there could potentially be even more positive reforms coming. I mean, we don't know. Yeah. But yeah, certainly RIGI has been key. We've now applied for that. We expect to receive approval shortly. That's a game changer for our project. If any more positive benefits come about from this administration, it'd be obviously very, very positively received, we believe.
Okay, so you've got 350 million ounces of gold equivalent under RIGI. If you're accepted, you've got 30 years of tax stability. Let's talk about exploration upside at Diablillos. Is there still exploration upside? To what extent are you continuing to pursue that? Or conversely, as you get towards that mine build, will you take your foot off the gas of exploration as you sort of focus on the mine build?
So that's one of the things that really makes this project very, very unique. I mean, typically, as you get to the DFS, as we are, you've essentially drilled off the project and maybe you're focused on infill drilling and tightening up the spacing of the drill results to convert things into the reserve category. For us, that's completely not the case. I mean, we're still expanding. So this project's open for 2 kilometers along strike. We have one large deposit. It's still open in both directions and it's open at depth. And so we're still drilling. So we've announced over the last few months some very high-grade gold intercepts, and that's outside of the pit towards the east. We call it the Oculto East deposit, and we've been drilling, hitting some remarkable grades. Again, this is open pitable in oxides. We've announced several holes. One of them, I think one of the best intercepts we've announced was over 30 meters of 10 grams of gold in oxides. the cutoff grade is like 0.3. Anything above 0.3 is economics. When you're announcing 10 grams, I mean, that's extremely, extremely profitable rock, anywhere near current commodity price levels. And we've announced several intercepts, with similar grades and similar widths to that over the last few months. So the drilling is still open to the east. There's a high-grade gold zone that we're exploring. To the west as well, it's still open. This Jack deposit still remains open, and that's high-grade silver. And then at depth, now we're drilling. So we've only been focused on the oxides, so the upper portion of this deposit. Beneath this deposit, we've encountered some high-grade gold and copper intercepts and sulfides, and now we've drilled some deep holes there as well to better understand what sits beneath this. And so there's still a lot of exploration upside ahead of us, but being now to take advantage of Riggy, you do have to move this project forward. And so right now, we're already big enough. This is very robust. As I mentioned, the payback period is measured in months here. And so while we're advancing this towards construction, we're still going to continue exploring and still growing the resource. And then potentially down the road, we'll announce an expansion. So the current feasibility study is just a 9,000 ton per day scenario. But with the growing resource, you can easily increase that. And even we're looking at scenarios of doubling the throughput, going from 9,000 tons per day initially, and then adding another 9,000 ton per day circuit, so going up to 18,000 tons per day. And then this would by far be the largest silver mine in the world. There's tremendous upside here, and it's still early days. And I'd say over the next few years, we're going to continue to evaluate all those options very seriously.
Well, let's focus on that point, John, because primary silver deposits are very, very rare. And the past couple of years have seen the three best juniors of their generation be developed and be bought in transactions: Mag Silver, Silvercrest, Gato Silver. AbraSilver is one of the leading companies in the next crop of emerging silver development deposits. How do you see the company's future? Will you be sort of taking out?
Look, the scarcity works in our favor either way. I think we have, as you mentioned, very, very few high-quality, large-scale, advanced-stage primary silver projects globally. There's we're one of certainly only a handful out there, I would say. So we're in a great position. I think our goal is we're going to continue to advance this. The more we advance and de-risk this, obviously the market's rewarding that. And so that's going to continue to be the case. Once we get the permits in place and we have Riggy in place and we have the feasibility study in place, we get our project financing in place and construction continues to move forward. As you get closer and closer to production, your multiple increases. And so clearly we're going to continue to add value. At the end of the day, if somebody wants to have a discussion, I think we're in a very, very strong negotiating position. We will have those discussions at the right time, and we're certainly open to those discussions. But our focus remains very focused on moving this project forward and ultimately into production ourselves.
Well, whilst the Diablillos is obviously a very attractive silver deposit, when you sort of look at the M&A landscape, one of the things that is noticeable is that the transactions have tended to occur on projects that had already been built and turned into mines. The three I mentioned in the silver space very much show that as well. So realistically speaking, do you feel you're going to have to build it before the offer comes in or an offer comes in?
Yeah, no, when you build it, certainly when you're operating, you get a much higher multiple. And so you've completely de-risked it then at that stage. So yeah, that would be ideal. But yeah, I feel the single asset silver producers have now been acquired. There aren't many of them left, if any. So those have now been acquired. Now we're in the next phase down. Again, there's only a handful of, I'd say, advanced stage primary silver projects looking to make a construction decision within the next 6 to 12 months, let's say. And so, as we continue to advance it, obviously the multiple increases as you de-risk the project and move it forward. And so, I think it's, that's our primary objective, is continuing to move this project along. And again, now with the stability agreement in Argentina with the 30 years, I think this project's extremely attractive. And so we'll be moving this forward on a timely basis.
Okay, you've got a lot going on, so let's end by talking about some of the catalysts for 2026. Where do you want the company to be this time next year?
Yeah, so between now and then, a lot of news flow. So first off, a lot more drilling. So again, we're drilling some of these deeper targets into the sulfides right now. It could be very exciting. We'll announce those. And then for the oxides, we're continuing to grow the resource. So this time next year, I expect we're going to have a much higher resource. Again, we'll be updating the resource estimate once we announce our feasibility study. So again, as I mentioned, at the end of Q1, we'll be announcing a feasibility study. We'll give another resource update. You can expect a material uptick in the resource at that time, and then we'll continue to drill. Likely, based on the track record, I think we'll continue to find more high-grade ounces here. So the resource will be significantly larger next year. Obviously, we'll have the permits in place, the EIA, we'll have RIGI in place, we'll have our feasibility study announced. By this time next year, I fully expect we would have our financing package in place as well. So this will be now fully funded and entering a construction decision. So the FID, final investment decision, will be around this time next year, I would imagine. So in the next 12 months, and then construction activities will start. And then it's a 2.5-year construction timeline. So in 2029, this will be in full production.
Okay, so happy days. Then the real work will start. John Miniotis, thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And we have a lot more to come from the 2025 NBC Capital Markets CEO Mining Conference here in London, England. So stay tuned and hit that subscribe button. I'm Paul Harris, and this is Kitco Mining.
Kitco Mining, special coverage of the National Bank of Canada Capital Markets CEO Mining Conference, is brought to you by Agnico Eagle.